Imagine a beggar claiming to be a long-lost emperor, and everybody goes along with it. It's a crazy story that took place in Flanders in the 1220s. An impoverished hermit claimed to be the long-lost Baldwin, formerly Count of Flanders and Hainault, but subsequently Emperor of the Latin Empire of Constantinople. There were probably some powerful figures moving in the shadows who made this possible, but they soon lost control of the creature they had created. The False Baldwin was unstoppable, even on the battlefield. The story doesn't end the way you might expect, but just watch to the end and see for yourself. The Fourth Crusade sinned against its own ideals. Out of greed, its leaders diverted it to Constantinople. One of the commanders was Baldwin. He originally did not want to stay in the Holy Land after the military conflicts. However, since the army campaign was diverted and took Constantinople, fate had other plans for him. The victorious Crusaders established the so-called Latin Empire in place of the Eastern Roman Empire. It had only a fraction of the Byzantine territories actually under control and was heavily dependent on Venice, but these were to be only temporary problems, according to the will of the Crusaders. Full of self-confidence, they therefore elected Baldwin as their first emperor in 1204. I am working on a book about the Latin Empire, and therefore have to pull myself together at this point not to digress too much. What you need to know is this. The new empire was immediately surrounded by numerous enemies. One of them was the Bulgarian Empire, which in turn took a liking to the idea of inheriting the Byzantine Empire. In 1205, the armies of the Latins and the Bulgarians clashed. Baldwin became a prisoner and was never to be seen again. I will make a video at some point about what might have happened to him. The important thing for us is that his whereabouts in his Western European dominions of Flanders and Hainault were unresolved. The fact that the Bulgarian Tsar had written to the Pope that Baldwin was dead did not detract from this. Therefore, what happened in 1221 in a Franciscan monastery in Flanders had to happen at some point. A man found his long-lost uncle here, who had 27 companions with him. The group was armed and declared that they had been on the crusade with Baldwin and had subsequently fought for his brother Henry, who had taken the imperial crown of Constantinople. Now they had returned. Shortly thereafter, a man appeared in the town of Valenciennes, whom the sources describe as a mysterious stranger. He gave away money to the poor and claimed that Baldwin himself would soon return. From here on, the rumors took on a life of their own. There were always new reports that the emperor and/or his companions would soon be back in Flanders. In February 1224 it happened. Some noblemen believed to recognize the companion of Baldwin in a begging hermit. This happened in the village of Mortain. The hermit, however, vehemently denied this. The nobles drew the only logical conclusion: if the beggar was not one of Baldwin's companions, then he must be the emperor himself. The fact that the beggar also emphatically denied this did not dissuade them from this belief. At some point, however, the hermit understood that it would be better for him to play along with the charade. The historian Robert Lee Wolfe has put forward a theory that I think is plausible. Flanders was by now ruled by Countess Joan. This was Baldwin's eldest daughter and hated by part of the local nobility. The emperor's return would be an excellent opportunity to remove the ruler and replace her with a puppet. In the week before Easter, 1225, the beggar was convinced and publicly announced that he was indeed Baldwin. He was subsequently able to enter Valenciennes in triumph. Especially the poor population cheered him. The false Baldwin explained his long absence as follows. He had been in Bulgarian captivity, where he had been tortured. He cited numerous scars on a foot with a missing toe as proof. After this imprisonment, he lived for some time among the Muslims as one of their own. The Pope had banished him for 7 years as punishment. Therefore, he had to live as a beggar for this time and was not allowed to make himself known. If these explanations already showed some imagination, it was still nothing compared to what the beggar and his defenders knew how to invoke to wipe away some obvious problems of the story. The hermit was about 30 centimeters shorter than the real Baldwin. This was explained by captivity and age. The fake Baldwin also did not know his way around Flanders and could only speak broken French. The real emperor was a master in the use of this language. His long time under the Greeks and the Saracens was responsible for this, the supporters of the false emperor defiantly declared. The latter wrote a letter to his daughter, officially announcing his return. At the same time, something happened that the nobles who supported the false game did not expect. The beggar found close followers of his own who brought the coinage of Valencians under their control for him. This gave him access to substantial financial resources. Joan refused to meet personally with her supposed father. Instead, she sent her closest advisor Arnoul to verify its authenticity. Rumor had it that the two shared a bed, so she seemed to be able to trust him. But the letter caused a sensation after a parley. For unexplained reasons, Arnoul stated on record that he actually believed the impostor to be the emperor. Now the French king Louis VIII took notice. He had all the people who knew the real Baldwin tracked down. None of them recognized the emperor in the beggar, and it was by far not only people who had acquired a glimpse of the count. Among the persons who was also Baldwin's former secretary Walter, who had served him for years. Walter neither recognized the impostor, nor did the latter know who his secretary was. However, the story about the returned emperor was too good for the nobility and the poor, who were hostile to Joan, to give it up just for the sake of truth. They continued to stick to the hermit. Joan made an intelligent move. She accepted that for people from Flanders and Hainault, the time might simply have been too long to recognize Baldwin. She therefore sent the man and his 27 companions from the Franciscan monastery to the beggar. They had fought together and therefore must have been able to identify him, argued the countess, who knew very well that in all probability her father had been tortured to death in Bulgarian captivity. The 28 men did not know this. However, they assumed that Joan wanted them to not be able to identify the impostor as the emperor. So they testified just that, but garnished the story with the fact that they had seen the real Baldwin die on the battlefield. As little as was known about his whereabouts, word had spread that this was not the case. The 28 men had exposed themselves as further impostors. Now things got crazy. The imposter site cannibalized the event for propaganda purposes. Entire towns defected to the fake Baldwin. The poor in the communities elected their own city councils with his blessing. As a result, Joan forbade his recognition, which triggered a war between her and the imposter. The latter won it without much effort. Joan had to flee to Paris to the French king to save her life. Meanwhile, on April 11th, 1225, the false Baldwin even received a letter from the English king Henry III, welcoming him back home and expressing his hope that the traditional alliance between Flanders and England could be re-established. The French king now intervened personally. He sent his aunt, Sibylle, to the impostor. His aunt was not only closely related to the French monarch, but was also the sister of the real Baldwin. She immediately recognized that it was not her brother who was standing before her. However, she did not let this show, but instead convinced the impostor emperor to meet the French king in Peron. The latter agreed and immediately set off. It became a triumphal procession. Everywhere the fake Baldwin passed, people cheered him. One source describes the following events, beginning with this sentence:
"If God were to come to earth, he could not be better greeted." The meeting with the king, however, was less pleasant. The impostor could not answer any of the monarch's questions, and these were not exactly complicated. Louis questioned the fake Baldwin about his marriage, his knighthood, and his campaigns. His defenders tried to explain that the impostor knew the answers very well, but refused to answer them because they were simple questions, offended him, or because he found them unseemly. No one believed them. The game seemed to be over, but it was not. Baldwin asked for a break. This was granted to him. Louis, however, had him isolated to prevent him from getting any assistance. The impostor waited until night and escaped through a window. The escape was the right decision. Various bishops from France and Flanders were also present during the interrogation. These used the break to inform Louis that they recognized the impostor. It was the juggler Bertrand de Rains. He had already tried in the past to assume the identity of Louis of Blois, who had died at Baldwin's side in 1205. For this he was sent to prison, where he got his scars. His missing toe was frozen off. Louis considered his tasks thus completed. He returned to Paris, highly amused by these events.
The false Baldwin made his way to Valenciennes. Here the poor had formed a commune in his name. The nobility, however, had fallen away from the impostor as a result of the events in Peron and had defected to Joan. In the civil war that followed, the nobility achieved a clear victory. The false Baldwin and his closest followers did not care about this. They disappeared in a night and fog action and took all the money from the coinage with them. They moved to the German city of Cologne. Here ruled Archbishop Engelbert, who was an enemy of Louis and of Joan. The cleric welcomed the impostor as the real Baldwin. And it was not that there was no warning. One of the bishops from Peron was also present in Cologne and tried to inform Engelbert about the impostor. This made the archbishop so angry that he forced his subordinate to recant. The bishop had to publicly declare that it was the real Baldwin after all. However, the latter and his followers did not remain in Cologne for long. Engelbert recommended that the impostor move to Rome and reclaim his empire from the Pope. However, this did not happen. The companions of the false Baldwin had to learn the hard way that impostors are not to be trusted. They camped on the Rhine and lay down for the night. The impostor took all the money and ran off. He was foolish enough to return to France. Here Louis' men seized him. They handed him over to Joan. The king advised the countess not to kill him. She would make him a legend. She did not listen. Joan had the impostor dragged in chains across Flanders, publicly tortured, and finally executed. In this way, she created a myth that lasted for centuries. The crowds were already unhappy during the torture and execution, as they still believed the impostor to be the real count. An abbot gave the corpse an honorable burial. Joan, however, had it dug up again and left to decompose in public. In the monastery of St. John, whiskers of the man were kept and venerated as relics. Others drank water that criminals sold them, claiming that it was the bath water of the executed men. The German historian Eduard Winkelmann, who wrote several standard 19th century works on the Staufer dynasty, believed the impostor to be genuine as late as 1889. The impact story of the fake Baldwin was more powerful than that one of the real one.